Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of East Cambs District Council Planning Committee. And our guests will have the luxury of being able to move down from whichever seat they want to sit in. If you haven't been here before, sir, we would normally go 2 hours for a comfort break. That's not going to happen, I think, today. And if you want to use the facilities, you go out of this door here and turn left, or go out of that door and straight on. Also, if you don't know quite who's doing what, elected members are along here, ending with me. I'm the chairman, and the officers are around here, and they're here to advise us on technicalities and legalities. So we first thing we do is the fire safety briefing from Patrick.
Thank you, Chair. If the fire alarm does sound, please leave by the nearest exit, which is here, or the doors behind me. Please do not use the lift, and note that the congregation point is in the car park in front of the building.
We have some new members with us today, and I'd like to say welcome. We pride ourselves in this committee in that it's non-dogma and it's common sense going to the top of the list. And so I know that we've got, we have, first of all, we have a new vice chairman, Councillor Goldsack. We have Alan Sharp is now a full member. Councillor Colbert is a full member. And yes, that's the changes, but I think we also have some changes in the subs. I've got we'll move on to apologies and substitutions. So Patrick, what have we got?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we've got apologies from Councillor Martin Goodall, and Councillor Keith Horgan is substituting for him.
And that's it. Okay. Any declarations of interest from members? Yes.
As a county councillor and as a member of the Assets and Procurement Committee at County Councillor, I would like it noted that that discusses the business of the applicant today. We haven't met as that committee yet. We haven't met until next week. So I believe, and I've taken advice on this, I believe that I'm perfectly okay to be involved in this meeting, but I would like it noted that I do carry that non-pecuniary representation of that role. Thank you.
Minutes. Oh, Councillor Whelan.
Also a member of the County Council. I'm not on the Assets Committee, so but I'm just declaring that I am a member of the County Council.
It's always better to get it out, even though it's not going to make any effect on you. Thank you. Minutes. Is there any reason why I shouldn't, at the end of this meeting, sign the minutes of the 7th of May? No? Okay, so we move on to Chairman's announcements. And I've got a mixture of sadness and happiness. We've got Dan Smith leaving us. He's been here 7 years, and he's going to new and more challenging occupations. So therefore, for that reason, I'm happy that he's fulfilling some of his life's ambitions, but I'm also very sad that we're losing him as a department. So I have said to him on many occasions recently, change your mind, but I don't think he's going to. So we are going to lose him at the end of this week, I believe, which is a little bit sudden, but thank you very much indeed, Dan. And now we move on to item number 5, which is a Dan Smith presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee members, old and new. Perhaps old is the wrong word, sorry, members existing and new. So, yeah, the item we'll be discussing today, agenda item 5, is a reserve matters application for Millstone Park in Burwell for the reserve matters of layout, scale, appearance and landscaping of 61 dwellings as well as all the infrastructure that you can see listed there. Before I start the presentation proper, I just wanted to draw members' attention. I mean, members may already have noticed, but in the proposed conditions for this report, there is one condition between conditions 7 and 8, which has escaped a number and a reason. So I apologise for the misdrafting there. And if it's all right with you, Chair, I'll just propose that when members vote on the proposal or on the resolution, that they delegate powers just for us to correct that and add a suitable reason to that condition.
Members, has any of you got any objection why Dan Smith's recommendation shouldn't be incorporated? No? No, well, that's straightforward. That's unanimous.
Thank you, Chair. So members undertook a site visit earlier today, and you can see the application site there in red, with the access off the main road, the Newmarket Road, and that plan also shows a couple of the phases that have already been permitted, as well as the balance of the land. This drawing here just shows the layout in a bit more detail, with the landscaping area to the east, the village green area to the west, and the housing in between. And just a slightly more detailed view there of the housing layout, and these plans are in the agenda should members wish to refer to them. So the main considerations are the principle of development, the housing numbers and mix, design and landscaping, highway safety and parking, the residential amenity impacts and that amenity that's created by the development, ecology, flood risk and drainage, any impact on the historic environment, and energy and sustainability. So turning first just to the principle of development, relatively straightforward. The site is part of a wider site, as members know, which is allocated for residential development of 350 or up to 350 houses. And this particular parcel would provide the remaining 61 dwellings out of that 350 that have not thus far come forward as part of previous schemes that have been to this committee. And on that basis, the principle of the proposal is acceptable. Turning to housing numbers and the mix, as I said, the scheme would use up the remaining balance of housing on the site. And that's acceptable under that policy, provided that design and landscaping are good, and I'll come on to those matters. As part of the outline permission, a requirement for 40% affordable housing was secured on this parcel. However, the applicant is indicating that they propose to deliver all of the housing on the site as affordable, and that is considered to be acceptable within the relevant policies of the local plan, that over provision. It's worth just noting that that would be unsecured as far as the permission is concerned, but I'm assured that is very much the intention of the applicant. The 40% obviously would remain secured. The mix of houses on the site slightly over provides for 3-bedroom houses against the SHMA, and under provides for smaller houses, but because there is an over provision of affordable housing, the mix actually delivers all of the requirement that would be required as far as affordable housing is concerned. Even if the development were not ultimately to come forward as 100% affordable, the requirement on the 106 for an affordable housing scheme does give us control over that mix in the future, which would ensure that the mix, sort of an acceptable mix of housing sizes, is delivered. In terms of design, the density on this site is slightly lower than it is on the other housing parcels, where you've got sites or parcels which include a large area of open space. Somewhat difficult to decide exactly what the density is, but it's certainly lower than it is on the other parcels. I've got it at about 28 dwellings per hectare. I think the applicant had it slightly lower at 26 in their design and access statement. And it incorporates suitable variety of character across the development. You've got around the crescent on the village green on the western side. You've got large houses fronting onto that, which is a continuation of the pattern of the development on the other side of the road around the village green. You've then got what would be referred to as the core housing area in the centre, with primarily semi-detached houses sort of fronting the streets, and those streets then leading through to the open space on the eastern side. And the dwellings facing onto that have a slightly more varied building line and are largely detached, providing a sort of slightly more varied character on that open space side, which is what we would expect from this particular parcel. In terms of the houses themselves, they're two-storey, well proportioned, well designed. And as I said, there are tree-lined streets linking the open space areas. And members will also note that there is a buffer strip provided to the bottom of the site there, 10 metres wide. The reason that we've incorporated that into the scheme via an amendment was, as I explained earlier on site, whilst the housing balance is being used up, it's not occupying all of the land that was previously allocated for housing development, and it's likely that in due course an application will come forward for additional housing to the south of this parcel, albeit not under the outline permission. That would have to be under a full application or another outline. The reason that we've incorporated a buffer strip into this parcel is because we don't want to predetermine any application that may or may not come forward, and we need to sort of reserve the option of landscaping the southern boundary of this parcel should that not occur, and that strip allows us to do that. And members will note there's a condition proposed which would require the landscaping of that via a submitted scheme were a permission for land to the south not to come forward. So moving on to highway safety and parking, the main access, as members know, is already approved under the outline. Members will have seen today that the main road is the primary spine road has been implemented already, and this scheme takes its accesses off that, as well as one which would come round on the sort of northeastern point from the self-build phase to the north. The local highways authority is content with the access. Most of the roads on there, I think all the roads are proposed for adoption and are of an adoptable level. That's the stuff that's shown in purple on that plan. The council's waste team has confirmed that the waste collections are acceptable. We made just very small amendments to the cycle and bin store to enable sufficient waste receptacle provision in that. And in terms of parking, there are 2 on-plot spaces for every dwelling, save for the 2 smallest dwellings, which both have 1 space each. They are one bedroom units, and there's also 16 visitor parking spaces proposed across the scheme, and that is a provision which is in line with the council's policy of 1 per 4 dwellings for visitor spaces. So in terms of residential amenity, officers are of the view that these are well-designed homes with adequate on-plot parking, gardens in excess of the 50 metres squared, which is the guidance in our supplementary planning document. There are acceptable levels of separation between the properties on site, meaning that they'll all have a good level of privacy and won't be overshadowed. And there are, as I said, green links between landscaped areas, and the areas of play space will provide a good level of amenity and an attractive environment for future residents. As far as ecology is concerned, the ecological impacts of the development of the wider site were considered acceptable under the outline permission. There's a condition that's proposed for this scheme, which would secure enhancements on the parcel itself, and the landscaping of the wider parcel would obviously also provide some further ecological benefits. As far as flood risk is concerned, the site's at low risk of flooding in flood zone 1. the outline permission required that we receive detailed drainage schemes for each phase as it comes forward, and those have been submitted and they're considered acceptable by the relevant drainage bodies. In our view on this scheme being furthest from the centre of Burwell, there's not considered to be any impact on the built heritage, and there have been archaeological investigations which have already taken place on site, and the county is happy that no further archaeological conditions are necessary. And as far as energy and sustainability is concerned, again, the outline requires that an energy and sustainability strategy is submitted with each phase. That has been submitted with this phase and it's considered acceptable. And the energy demands of the development will be reduced by building energy efficient homes. As members probably know, the building regs are relatively ambitious now in terms of a sort of fabric first approach to reducing energy demand, and energy will also be provided by air source heat pumps with water heated by electricity as opposed to gas. So as far as our recommendations concerned, as I said, the proposals to provide the remaining 61 houses relative to the outline permission. It's proposed currently that they'll all be developed as affordable homes, and that minimum of 40% is secured by the 106 agreement. The design and the layout of the scheme and its landscaping is considered to be good quality and acceptable, as are the homes themselves in terms of their elevational treatments, the design and the environment they would create. And overall, the scheme is acceptable when considered against the local plan policy. So happy to recommend members that you approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. We only have a speaker, Justin Bainton. If you'd like to come up and sit at the desk. You need to turn your microphone on and you'll have 5 minutes, and the amber light will come on at 4. Start when you're ready, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak at Planning Committee. This application has been submitted for a reserve matter scheme for 61 new homes at Millstone Park, Burwell. This proposal delivers a thoughtfully designed, policy-compliant phase of the development. The homes will sit within an already approved wider outline scheme and bring forward high-quality, well-planned housing that responds directly to the Council's housing objectives. One of the most important points to highlight is the housing mix and affordability. All 61 homes within this phase will be affordable housing, significantly exceeding the policy requirement of 40%. There will be a mix of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bed homes, offering options for individuals, couples and families alike. The Council's strategic housing team have confirmed that the proposed mix aligns with the identified local need in Burwell and the wider district. That includes a substantial proportion of shared ownership, 30%, helping to more people to move onto the housing ladder. This over delivery of affordable housing represents a lasting benefit to the local community at a time when there's a need for genuine affordable housing, and this remains high. In terms of design, this is a high quality scheme with careful attention given to layout, landscaping and street character. Homes have been designed in a traditional style that are laid out around an attractive tree-lined streets and open spaces, including a new area of play provision. Properties along the eastern edge have more informal character, responding positively to the rural setting and landscape context. At a density of around 28 dwellings per hectare, excluding the large open space to the east, the phasing reflects a lower density, a landscape-led approach. It's suitable for its location. It provides an effective transition between the more compact earlier phases and the open countryside to the east, without compromising the overall housing delivery. Importantly, no objections have been raised by statutory constituencies, the local highways authority, lead local flood authority, environmental health, Anglian Water and others all confirm the proposal to be acceptable. Minor layout comments raised during the consultation process have been addressed through amendments, and the scheme has been adjusted in close collaboration with officers to resolve detailed design points. The drainage strategy has been reviewed and accepted. The landscape scheme is well integrated, and biodiversity enhancements, including native planting and habitat features, will improve the ecology value of the site. The open space would also provide distinct areas of formal equipped play space and connecting footpaths. The scheme also completes a central village green. All homes will be constructed to meet current building regulations and be of high efficiency standards, including the use of air source heat pumps. In summary, this application delivers much needed housing through a well-designed landscape-led scheme that aligns with local plan policy. It provides a strong mix of house types, responds positively to the site setting, and has drawn no objections from statutory consultees. We fully support the officer's recommendation to approve and hope members will do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, questions? Away you go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for the 100% affordable housing that you're providing within this space. I applaud you for that, especially for the three-bed homes that you're providing as well, which will obviously attract families with young children to the area. So in line with that particular point, just to confirm regarding the play areas in this phase, are the play areas, what type of play areas are you proposing in this particular areas, including the age group? What's the type of play area you're proposing?
Sir, could you press your mic again, please?
Apologies. But I can confirm that there's a toddler's play area with 39 metres squared, a junior play area with 152 metres squared, and youth play area that's about 189 metres squared, which is combined with phases 4 and 5 as well. And that's located, you can see on the plan, on the east side within sort of the central circular area. And that serves this side of the development. There's also play provision elsewhere on the wider site, which is being implemented, which connects to the other phases of development.
Thank you. And are these play areas able to support kids with disabilities?
They haven't been designed specifically yet. Sorry, they haven't been designed specifically yet, but we'll make sure those comments are incorporated as we develop the detailed play area design. But yeah, we'll be designing to try and include inclusive access to the play provision as far as possible.
Thank you. So a few more questions, sorry. In regards to the affordable housing, because I know there are 61 homes within this particular phase. Are they affordable housing within other phases as well? Because obviously it's 40%, I'm guessing, against the 350 homes. So how many affordable housing do you have across the whole application?
On the other
On
phase,
phase, yeah.
yeah, on the other phases, sorry, I don't know the number, but it's 40% provision across the other phases. So this is the only phase that is 100% affordable. The others are the section 106 requires that 40% affordable housing is provided across the entire site. So the other phases are 40%. Apologies, I don't know the specific breakdown.
That's fine. Thank you. Sorry. And what measures have you taken to ensure good access to public transport from, because obviously there are 350 homes across the whole. So what have you done within your means to ensure there's accessibility to public transport?
I think the other phases have been delivered by Vistry, but there will be requirements through those phases for a travel plan, and we'll be doing something similar as well as part of this scheme when it's implemented. So in outlining to future residents what the opportunities are for sustainable transport. The outline application also delivered a cycle path link on the south side of the site that's directed towards, I think it's Exning as well. So a lot of consideration been given during the life of the whole outline application to this issue.
Thank you. And any of the affordable homes, do they have wet rooms, or are they designed with wet rooms already installed, or are they able to incorporate wet rooms in the future?
To be honest, that's sort of a level of detail that I can't honestly answer, but we'll be conforming to building regulations and their requirements. But I can obviously take that up with the client, but I haven't got the details, I'm afraid.
Thank you, Chair. You said that the other phases are being developed by Vistry. Is this phase going to be developed by Vistry or somebody else?
As far as I'm aware, there's no intention for Vistry to be developing this particular phase. It will be either this land or another party that will be delivering it.
That was the question I was just going to ask, who would be developing the site? The other question was, in view of the amount of time that this planned application has been approved, outlined for the site, and the weeks and months and years it's been standing like that, when would you anticipate being on site to do your development?
That's a very good question. I can't really answer it, I'm afraid. I know that the client is very keen to obtain the planning consent and move the scheme forward to implementation. I don't have a sort of start date, but my understanding is that they'll be looking to, we've got obviously a detailed reserve matter scheme that's capable of implementation should the scheme be approved. And so the intention is to move forward and implement. But I don't have a program or a date, I'm afraid.
Councillor Trout.
Thank you. I noticed that you've only got tandem parking along there. Why is this? And because it's tandem parking usually means there's only one car is parked there and the other one on the road, and I've seen that in many other developments like this. Why can't we have side-by-side parking? Is it because the density is too high?
I wouldn't say it's because the density is too high, but it is probably the most efficient way of developing the sites, it's fair to say, in terms of the plot subdivision. The site layout is specifically designed so that the visitor car parking is well defined and only available in certain locations. So it doesn't really lend itself to off-site street parking unless it's within the visitor spaces. But the two spaces obviously accord with standards. There's no absolute prescriptive requirement not to provide a tandem parking, and there's been obviously tandem parking provided on other phases as well. It just seemed to be, in terms of this scheme, this layout, it's the most efficient use of the way of bringing forward the development.
Thank you. Well, two things. One was I'm a bit concerned about parking as well, because 3-bedroomed houses could mean 3 cars or possibly 4 cars. And I'm wondering where the 3rd and 4th cars might end up. The other thing that was troubling me is hedgehogs. Seriously, is there provision on the site for hedgehogs to be able to move around freely? Because they are now getting increasingly endangered.
In regard to your second question, I don't have an answer to that, I'm afraid. I would say that there is a requirement to provide a detailed landscaping scheme, which we can and also a requirement to provide sort of ecology enhancements. And there's no reason why we shouldn't look into the hedgehog. I was going to say mitigation. I'm not really sure what the hedgehog requirements are, but we can certainly pick that up as part of the ecology for the site. In terms of the requirement for car parking spaces, it's a policy requirement to provide 2 spaces per unit, and we're obviously accord with the policy. It's obviously there's an issue about affordability, so should people be able to afford to own more than 2 cars, but we're following sort of local and national guidance in terms of delivery of car parking on the site. But so I know your comments about car parking.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate what you're saying about car parking, but it's the children of the family that can produce the problems. And going back briefly to the hedgehogs, the issue that bothers me is the crossing of roads. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions and 1 comment, really. I'll start off with a comment. Like others, I think I understand that it meets the policy, but I'm a bit concerned about the parking, I think. But page 31, Local Highways Authority, they've not objected to it. But in the detail, it mentions about the verges and the trees. And it says the Local Highways Authority are not going to adopt those. So going forward, if you're going to be, presumably the developer, this land will be using a registered housing provider, are we assuming that the housing provider is going to pick up the responsibility for cutting those verges and looking after those trees? Because if they aren't, we've got an accident, we've got something waiting to happen 5 years down the line or even a year down the line where the verges aren't being cut by either district or county because there's no agreement. And the housing authority may be washing their hands of it. Perhaps I'm overthinking it, but that sounds to me like a problem possibly waiting to happen if the agreement, if the agreement's not put in place first. That's the first question.
Yeah, I'll raise the comments you've raised with the client. This Land Limited, obviously in indoor developments is typically a service charge, which helps with the maintenance of communal areas. Obviously, the provision might be slightly different for affordable housing, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to sort of take the management's question away and look into it for you, but I can't answer that, I'm afraid.
If I can come back on that first question, I've got another one. That you slightly took what I was going to say in terms of service charge, because obviously if it's shall we say, a commercial development, then you'll quite commonly have service charges, but where you've got affordable housing, that some of those tenants might not be able to afford service charges, etc. So I think that is something that needs to be looked at. But thank you for the answer. The second point, and you touched on it, is I just wonder if you've got any time scale around the cycleway, the footpath that's due to be put into the south of the development, major on parts phases 1 and 2, because I've had many discussions with Suffolk colleagues because they've got the same issue the other side of the border where development's being made in Axneen, and the agreement is for the two to meet up and there to be a lovely cycle path that people can get into Newmarket.
Yeah, I mean, I can confirm that the client's made full payment of monies to assist with delivery of that in accordance with the requirements of Suffolk County Council and also Cambridgeshire District Council. So they've paid the requirements through the Section 106 agreement to help deliver that. I'm not in control over the delivery of that link though, but they certainly have the full monies from which were being agreed as part of the outline plan consent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say to start with that I'm delighted to see that you're going to use air source heat pumps across the whole of this development, and that's a move in the right direction. My worry with air source heat pumps is the cost of running them, and on a site where there is a large number of affordable houses, the cost of running these will depend on the efficiency of the properties that are going to be built. And I wondered whether or not there is any form of measure of how efficient these properties will be.
I mean, the starting point will be obviously the buildings will be sort of building regulations compliant. There's also a requirement through a condition to secure energy efficiency measures, and that includes obviously the provision of air source heat pumps. To be honest, in terms of what's being targeted in terms of thermal efficiency, obviously we'll be pursuing a fabric first approach, but I don't have any details about what that level will be, I'm afraid. But the comments are definitely noted.
Thank you. Following on from the air source, I mean, have you considered actually having ground source, which for new development might be far more effective because it's actually independent of what the temperature is outside, whereas air source is very much dependent and is less efficient when you actually want the heating, i.e. when it's freezing. Has there been any consideration done to having ground source for such a big development?
Yeah, I think there are probably pros and cons to a lot of the renewable energy technologies. Certainly, air source heat pumps are being used quite regularly now on schemes which work effectively. I don't know, to be honest, about the ground source heat pump approach. It's not something which was being actively pursued because it was identified at an early stage that the air source heat pump suited these units and the development. Sorry, that's all I can say.
It's a pity you don't actually look at the figures for that. And for new development, this might be a much better thing. Thank you.
I think that's all of the members' questions, but I'd like to just make a couple of comments. I'm well aware that both the local district council members have made no comment on this, and that the officers who have recommended it have come out in favour of this application. But I still do find it rather hard to accept that when someone's building a new estate and they claim that 11.3 houses per acre is sort of premium standard. Quite honestly, I think it's my opinion is it's probably overdevelopment, which means that on 2 of the houses, you've only got 1 car parking space, number 30 and 31. And one assumes that those people have neither got a relationship with anybody who owns a car or have any relatives or any friends, which is rather a sad state of affairs. So I don't know, what's the reason for having just 2 cars, two houses with only 1 car parking space?
Those were units were the smallest 1-bed units.
I understand that.
Yeah. So it was considered that there would generally be a demand for 1 space.
Well, it is recommended by the officers, but nevertheless, what is the housing need? I mean, we're talking about affordable housing. What is the housing need for Burwell?
Sorry, I don't have that information in front of me.
Quite relevant, isn't it, in a case like this?
I mean, the council's housing team have obviously been consulted and confirmed that they're happy with the housing mix and the delivery of the proposed housing and supportive of the scheme. And it's meeting the need that they've identified. And we've obviously discussed that at the pre-application stage, and that's been transferred through to the planning submission stage as well.
It's really starting to move into the 21st century. Is it really a good idea to have? We all know what happens. Other members have mentioned it. You know, people don't always leave at the same time of day, so they end up by parking 1 on their site and 1 on the road. And it seems to be very short-sighted to come up with a proposal. However, I recognise that the 2 local members have made no comment or in favour of it. And I recognise that you've been recommended for approval by the planning department. But I would ask you, when you have your discussions, to just say to whoever it is, that is it really a good idea to have tandem parking in the future? Is it really going to help us sell houses? Anyway, that's my little rant. Any other questions for the applicant? No. Officer, any comments you'd like to make?
I think I just did want to come back on, I think Councillor Akamali asked a question about the proportion of affordable housing. I just want to clarify, I don't think it is material to your considerations, but just for the record, the Section 106 agreement secures, I think, 25%. In respect to phase 1, secured 25% on the first 100 houses and then 40%, and then it is 40% across the rest of the site, just for absolute transparency. And obviously this site would be secured at 40% as per the legal agreement, with the intention that it's developed out as 100% affordable. Other than that, Chair, I don't think I've got anything else that I want to raise, but I'm happy to take members' questions if they've got any.
Well, that's exactly where we've got to now. So it's members' questions to officer. Councillor Trapp, you seem to be first in the queue.
Oh, my gosh, what an honour. Dan, when the density of dwelling, is that for the site there or including the green space? Is it for what part of that? Over what land is it considered? Over what area?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Trapp, for the question. It's a good point, and it was something that Justin and I had discussed briefly in terms of quite how you arrive at the figure. Where you've got so the reason I put the density in was to provide a comparison with the other sites so that you could understand how dense or not this is relative to the other housing that's been approved. And as I said, it is a slightly lower density than has been provided elsewhere on site. So for that purpose, I excluded the open space that's been provided, because I think if you include the open space, which is strategic open space, if you like, or at least sort of site, it's a perimeter open space, which due to the nature of the other housing phases wasn't provided as part of those parcels because they border the settlement. I felt it would appear unduly low. I mean, if you include that, I think you're down at kind of 13 dwellings per hectare, 5 dwellings an acre, which it clearly isn't a scheme of that density really in terms of how it would be appreciated. So yeah, I excluded the open space. It really just relates to the housing and the streets that you can see there. So that's that's the area that I used to come up with that calculation.
So does that include the barrier at the bottom, but the buffer zone? Sorry.
No, I don't think I did include that. I think I was just doing it on the kind of houses, gardens,
because it
streets.
Seems pretty dense, that housing, actually, looking at that. But it includes the green space, the sort of oval, the rugby ball green space to the west.
I think from recollection, I included the housing that you can see there and up to the edge of the red line. So also including the sort of spine road in that when I calculated that area of the site to then work out what the density was, which is the same approach that we took with the other phases. So as a comparison, so it is lower density than the other phases. It's somewhat marginal anyway, because it's 1 or 2 dwellings a hectare. But I don't think I mean, as a planner, to my eye, that's not a particularly dense scheme. It's relatively kind of, the centre of it has got, as I said, it's kind of got the character of the core housing, which was in the which is the same kind of character that's been applied across the site. And it's obviously a relatively orthogonal layout. So you've got houses back to back and then fairly clear perimeter block structure there. But to me, it's not overly dense. And as I said, relative to the other housing phases, it's slightly less dense. But yeah, I appreciate that's, you know, the character of it to some extent is a sort of slightly a matter of opinion. But yeah, we as officers, we were happy with it.
You say back to back because it looks, those lighter green things are gardens, aren't they? So is there any back to back there? Can't see any.
So you've in the central sort of third of the housing site there, you've obviously got the 2 streets that run perpendicular east-west, with the houses sitting both fronting each other on across the roads, and then those ones in the centre sort of sitting back to back. Yes, that's what I meant by that.
So the back to back in Leeds means
not yes, not back to back in the traditional sense. Sorry, no.
That's why I'm querying that. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you. Dan, I don't know the slide number, but can you go to the one that the text one that's starts with housing mix? That's it. Second bullet point. Second bullet, this is acceptable provided detailed design and landscaping are good. Is that going to be provided through a routine matters application?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Horgan. To clarify, what I was, it's probably not the most eloquent way I could have said it. What I was trying to say there was, as far as the first bullet point is concerned, the scheme is using up the remaining housing allocation on less than all of the allocated housing land. And in officer opinion, there's no problem with doing that, i.e. it's acceptable to deliver all of the housing on slightly less of the land, provided the detailed design and landscaping are good. And as part of the consideration of this application, we're of the view that they are. So that was the point I was trying to make with that bullet point.
Councillor Horgan, could you put your microphone on, please?
Oh, sorry, did I lean on it again? Sorry. Yeah, so I'm trying to understand the detailed design that you're looking for at some future point.
Thank you. Yeah, I would say it's not at some future point. It's more. I suppose in terms of this presentation, I will come on to our assessment of the detailed design, which I did then do. If you see what I mean. So the slight densification of the scheme, not that it's overly dense, I don't think, but the use of not all of the housing land. If we felt we'd ended up with a scheme that was of poor quality design, we would say one of the reasons for that is you haven't used all of your housing land to deliver the remainder of the housing. But we aren't of that view. We're of the view that the design is acceptable, the layout's good, the quality of the housing is good, and the public spaces. And on that basis, we have no issue with the fact that the balance of the housing uses slightly less housing land than it might have done. So that's those 2 points together that's what I was trying to explain in those 2 points. So there is nothing else to come in the future as far as detail that we'll see. It's more that I was discussing housing numbers and the mix there, and then the assessment of design kind of came later in the presentation.
Yeah, I'm just still trying to get my head around, because it says this is acceptable provided. Now to me, that reads that something else has to happen. Yeah, we know what the detailed design and landscaping is, or what it's going to be. This is what we're approving today. So what's the provision that we have to account for? Because we know what that design is, we know what the landscaping is, so it's acceptable based on the information we have in front of us today. There's no provided info.
Maybe, I don't know if provided is the wrong word. Providing in the event that, assuming, I guess, are other words you could use there. So it was simply a way of me trying to say that the only reason that it would be an issue to do that is if it resulted in a poor quality design, but it doesn't. So the conclusion that you've reached is the same one that I have, and I apologise if I've expressed it in a way that is confusing. But no, there isn't nothing else to come. We have all the information in front of us, and we're content that it's a good quality design.
So for the purpose of my own edification, if I can just rewrite that bullet point for you, is based on the detailed design and landscaping, this development is acceptable. Would that be a fair summation?
Absolutely a fair translation, yeah.
I am available for a small fee for writing these bullet points.
Thank you.
What concerns me, Dan, is we as a committee decided the whole of this site would only have X number of houses. And what we're faced with today is what we suspected would happen when we approved the first 2 phases of this site. And exactly that has happened. We have then thrown into half of the remaining site, about half of the remaining site, these houses. When we as a committee decided and passed the original planning for X number of houses, and now we look as if we are being taken for a ride, and eventually we'll be sitting in this committee and looking at the next proposal on this site. And I think as a committee, We told you and the planning department, this is what we've agreed, X number on this site, and I don't think we're going to end up with what we asked for or what we approved.
I'm happy to sort of comment on that. I don't know that there was a specific question, but I'm happy to kind of address what I understand are your concerns in the round, if you'd like me to, through you, Chair.
Okay, if you could just briefly answer it.
So I think it's absolutely the case that the site was allocated, or slightly smaller site actually was allocated for 350 houses, and then in the local plan, and then the outline permission was for up to 350 on the wider site. So as you say, I think as part of the assessment of previous applications, it was raised as a possibility that this is the circumstances that we might end up in. I would say, firstly, there is no guarantee that any more housing will be acceptable on site. That's something which, from a land use or spatial point of view, yes, there is land being reserved. Whether that is acceptable or not, given both highways capacity, drainage capacity, all those sort of in principle issues which would have to be looked at as part of a full application, we're not prejudging those at this stage. But we are being presented with a scheme which we feel is acceptable in and of itself. And on that basis, we don't feel it's reasonable to resist it just so that we use up all of the land that was previously allocated for housing in the outline. So I would say members will still be able to fully assess any application that comes forward in the future. And I would also say that the net densities, both on this parcel and the two previous parcels, don't exceed what was envisaged on the master plan for the outline permission. So there was a density in the low 30s that was envisaged on the housing parcels across the site as part of the outline permission. And none of the three phases have reached that level. And so perhaps it was always inevitable, once the outline had been granted, that this would happen. But I would also say, I think, we would just need to consider whether there is any harm in doing this. And in our view, there isn't any harm from this scheme. It's a good quality scheme, and it will deliver, in all likelihood, a lot more affordable housing than it needs to. And housing generally in the district, is something that we're trying to make good provision for housing. And if another application that comes in for housing on the site, and it's evidence that the site can accommodate it, then I don't think that's something that should necessarily be resisted just because it wasn't as originally envisaged. But as I say, all of those assessments about additional housing would need to come forward, or would need to be undertaken at the time that any application came forward. But I appreciate it is a change of plan or a change of expectation, and members should consider that. But obviously our view is that the scheme is acceptable as it stands.
Councillor Akinlawi.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to confirm the trigger points for building the sports hub as well as the play areas. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Akinwale. The trigger points, I've got a sheet of paper somewhere with the trigger points on, just bear with me a second. So the sports, so we're talking about, for all members' clarity, we're talking about land further south of this parcel, beyond the extent of the originally allocated housing land. There is a proposal to, or a requirement as part of the outline to provide sports pitches and space for a sports hub. The sports hub land is what has to be provided from the site owner to the parish council. And the trigger for doing that is prior to, well, it's no later than the occupation of the 100th dwelling. So it's effectively prior to the occupation of the 101st dwelling on site. The offer has to be made to the parish council. And then there is a cascade system that if the parish council can't identify or doesn't want to take it on for whatever reason, within a period of time, the district council has the option to do that, and the district council can try and identify local sports clubs who might be interested in taking it forward. And then after that, there's a provision that the developer also has to go through that process. And ultimately, were none of that to be successful, then the requirement for it to be sports land would fall away. But I don't envisage that happening because I think the parish council are very keen to take that on. But yes, to answer your question more simply, sorry, that it's prior to the 101st dwelling.
Thank you.
I've been seeing some distressed hand waving from Councillor Colbert. Have you got something you're desperate to say?
It wasn't meant to be distressed, Chair. I'm afraid I'm still worrying about my hedgehogs and also trees. I've got
I
an
don't think
idea.
the hedgehogs are filling everybody's mind.
No, I don't think they're going to be up the trees either. I really thought that I remembered district coming up with a hedgehog policy about having roads, newly constructed roads, built in such a way that the little things could get off them, basically.
Well,
There was with Richard Kay. I'm sure there was some concept.
do you have the opportunity to question the officer?
I'm so sorry.
Which is going to say to that. So if you ask him the questions you have,
Yeah.
he'll answer it.
Yeah, so sorry, officer. Have I imagined a consultation and a conclusion and policy?
No, there's no need to worry. You haven't imagined it. Yes, the council has got a hedgehog recovery strategy and has adopted an SPD on that matter. So with all new development, that SPD would be taken into consideration. The way that will normally happen with most development is as part of wider proposals or broader proposals for ecological enhancements generally, hedgehogs will kind of be given special recognition or reference, I suppose. So we would expect ecological enhancements that come forward to reflect the hedgehog recovery strategy. That generally for schemes of housing tends to be provision of transit routes. So things like hedgehog holes in fences so that they can find their way across the site without getting stuck. So whilst this outline permission was granted prior to the hedgehog recovery strategy being adopted, its aims can easily be picked up in the requirement for biodiversity enhancements more generally. And I have recommended that members apply a condition to this permission, which seeks to get a scheme across the site for biodiversity and ecology enhancements, and I would expect that that can be reflected, you know, with particular reference to hedgehogs in that document. There will obviously be roads on site, and given the nature of perimeter roads, it may be that hedgehogs have to cross those, but we can certainly look to ensure that as many transit routes as possible can be incorporated through things like hedgehog holes, which, as I said, is kind of what we would expect to see on a scheme like this.
Okay, thank you very much, because I do hate to see squashed hedgehogs on roads. Thank you. As for trees, I do share Councillor Sharp's concern about what's going to happen to the trees. There are actually even more with trees within this boundary than I'd at first realised, because clearly someone's going to have to look after the things. That's a statement rather than a question. I'll leave you to formulate your response, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the adoption of streets with trees in, it is something that it's not that the local highways authority doesn't make this point in respect of all its consultations. I'm not sure it's particularly consistent in that regard. I have certainly seen schemes where street trees have been included within areas that have been adopted. It was for a while, my recollection is that it was something that the county were trying to avoid. But we do have other streets on site, particularly I mean, you can see on that, no, you can't see on that because it's not a, you can see on that drawing there that on the main spine road, there are street trees that are proposed, and they're in areas which are part of adoption agreements, to my knowledge. And so it may be ultimately that the county will adopt them. So I personally was slightly surprised to see them say that they won't. I understand the reasons why, because they obviously require maintenance. But I don't foresee it being a particular problem, I have to say.
Okay, thank you for that. But clearly someone needs to end up owning them, not only in terms of maintenance, but bits dropping off them.
My understanding is these are standard conditions that are incorporated in every application, and so it's not a matter of saying will the roads be tarmac or whatever, because they will be. And of course the hedgehogs are a thing that every developer has to consider and take into account. Now we have Councillor Trapp.
Thank you. I was looking for these two single bed houses that had one parking place. Not them, but there's four single houses, aren't there? So some of them have two parking places and two, all right. But also in my investigation there, I looked at this, and I think some of this parking is absolutely pretty awful. I mean, 63, for instance, has parking on the other side of the road, really. 63 is the one just above the crescent on the corner there. Its parking is, I can see what's going to happen here, and this has happened, I think, on other estates I've been on like this, that they're going to park on the road. The parking is way back in the little cul-de-sac beyond it. The same thing with a number of houses there as well. I think 37, 38. There's a whole lot of things there, which I don't think this is a good design, actually. I mean, this is meant to be, we should not be having housing which has garages or parking spaces so far removed. I know it's part of the design code, but we should be doing better than that. And I've seen the estates where it is happening like that, and it is they're parking on the pavement, half on the pavement, half.
Thank you, Councillor Trapp. I don't know whether there's a specific question for me to answer. I think, as I appreciate concern has been raised by some members around the parking strategy. I would say, I understand the concern around tandem parking to some extent. In my experience, it can work well. I think some of that just depends on how it's, on individual users, whether they choose to use it properly. I think there is as well as a practical issue, there's a kind of design issue, those two things intersect. If you're trying to create streets which have a good level of building presence and enclosure, which is kind of generally good urban design, tandem parking allows you to narrow the gaps between buildings somewhat and create a more enclosed street, if that's the character you're trying to deliver. And if you don't do that, you either end up with very wide gaps between buildings, or you end up with frontage parking. The only thing really that the council's SPD on parking talks about is limiting the size of parking courts to a maximum of 6 spaces, 6 houses, forgive me, I can't recall exactly which. That isn't something that this scheme trips upon. And it also has a requirement generally for parking to be provided between buildings rather than in front of them, which is, again, what this scheme achieves. If you aren't going to do that, you either end up, as I said, with very gappy frontages, or you end up with parking in front of houses, which means you can't have them fronting the street quite as well. And you end up with a street which is kind of car dominated as opposed to with the cars being tucked away a bit more. So I think it's a mixture of design choice, sort of land use and practicality. I am not particularly concerned about it. I appreciate some members are more concerned. But what I would say is that the council doesn't have a policy on restricting tandem parking. So you would have to, I think you would have to really be persuaded that this resulted in a poor level of amenity for residents or a poor quality of design. And for me, it just doesn't, you know, that isn't the conclusion. And my advice to members would be to be think very hard about whether they would refuse this purely on the parking strategy. As I said, I think it comes down to the intention and the sort of the intention of individual owners and how they use the site, how they use the parking, as opposed to necessarily building in problems. But I appreciate that's my opinion.
Okay, I mean, but we ought to be facilitating decent parking. For instance, buildings 26 to 29 have got in-front parking. That little spur road to the north is all actually car parking off it. My main thing was actually about the fact that, says, for instance, 63 is the parking is remote from it. It is at the other side of the cul-de-sac. Yeah, but it's also leads to, and I've known this, leads to estates where they park on the road. And therefore, that's why I don't, anyway, that's the design we've got in front of us. We also presumably those, say, 63 will have electric car vehicle charging at the tandem places, won't it?
The requirement to deliver electrical car charging would just be in line with current building regulations requirements.
Which is?
I don't actually know off the top of my head. I think it's a percentage have to have the ability to have a charging point, a charger installed, so effectively have the infrastructure in place.
For all half the car parking.
If that's what you're telling me, then yes.
I don't know. I mean,
it would have to provide it in that location. But again,
okay.
I don't see a problem. I don't see that's unachievable. And I would say that yes, in effect, that is a parking court of sorts, but it's a very small one, and it would comply with the SPD in that sense because it's not one which exceeds 6 spaces.
Councillor Trapp, we will be getting to debate.
Yes,
that's soon.
Good debate. But
we're on questions to the officer.
I've stopped.
Okay, Councillor Ambrose Smith.
Thank you. Really just clarification. With my glasses on, I identified that there is a small rectangular, I won't call it a structure, in each of the gardens. Now, I'd like to think it was a bin store. It doesn't look big enough to be a shed. Is it something to do with the air source heating apparatus? Only the question I would mention is many housing providers do plonk a shed in every garden, but that doesn't look big enough to be a shed. Can you throw any light on this?
Yes, I can. They are sheds. That's what they're designed to indicate, and they would be required for cycle parking purposes, if nothing else. So I think we've got conditions on the recommended to members as far as the delivery of those.
Now,
sheds.
I think the planning manager would like to just answer you because he seems to be pointing out to me that it's already in the application, the answer. So,
right,
David.
Yeah, if you just look at the legend on page 48 of your thing. It's quite clearly shed 2 cycle spaces.
No. So you can park 2 cycles, but if you've got a lawnmower or children's impedimenta, or you're into gardening, you're going to be out of luck. So you've got to have a shed as well. Yeah.
Potentially, but
Cute.
as part of our sustainable travel sort of agenda,
Yeah.
providing these parking spaces for bikes is obviously something we would like to do. And then if people choose to use them in another way, so be
Yeah.
it.
So my wish of there would be bin storage out off the road is doomed to failure. Thank you.
Okay, we've now had questions to the officer. So now we move on to debate. So members. Away we go.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to join in at the debate stage. On the trip round this morning, I raised the issue of the tandem parking. But I'm pretty sure that what we've heard today categorically is that we have no policy for tandem parking. So the application we have before us today is 100% compliant. And that's the rules on which we've got to judge. For that and for everything else that I think the officer has put together in a very, very good report, I will be supporting the application because I can't see a justifiable reason not to do so. Thank you.
It is a fact, if you just let me make a comment. It is a fact that not everything is covered in our policies. And it is also a fact that tandem parking is legitimate. However, I don't think there's anyone in this room who likes it. So I don't think we've got a choice. However, we do have a choice in recommending to the planning department that we try and change the rules. Is that possible? Not for this case, obviously.
Well, at the moment, we're not seeking to do a new local plan. So clearly
Yeah.
we will not be able to put new policies in
course.
place. If members are so minded, we could consider creation of a new SPD. Again, that would take time. But that's what
Yeah.
would need to be done.
It would. Okay, sorry, we'll move on to debate. Councillor Akinwala.
Yeah, I think like Councillor Mark mentioned, I think obviously we have no choice but to approve it because like he mentioned, they are compliant with the officer's recommendation. So I'd like to support his proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, was it just approved, the application? Did you just approve it? Yes. Can I second it then, please?
So you are, Councillor Edwards, you are proposing that you agree with the officer's recommendation. And who's proposing it?
Chair, I was happy to propose it and it was seconded by Councillor
Okay, so we already have a proposal and a seconder. We'll continue with the debate. John.
Councillor Trapp. All right, thank you. I actually think it's a poor design. I think with that space and the possibility of more space because they've crammed it in, to have parking which is remote now from the houses, we've got the space, so why not do it? And I just find that something better could have been done. It looks nice, it looks trees and everything else, but actually what's happened is it's been crammed in. And I would certainly be opposing this. I think much better design can be made from such a state. So that's my view, and I think it's going to be a poor